Welcome back. Our next guest is pretty much living my dream. I hope he's living his too, because if you get to travel and write about your travels and get paid for it and then go again, I think that's pretty genius. And when you get to do it for National Geographic and all your writing gets paired with these gorgeous archival photos, Joe Yogerst is here with us. I'm sure you've seen his work. It might have been the LA Times, the San Diego Union-Tribune, or Conde Nast Traveler. He's been in the biz for a while. He's showing up for us everywhere. And now he's got his however many places and 5,000 ideas. So Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Lauren. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. And honestly, I was kid and dog sitting for my brother a couple weeks ago and thinking about this show, that being our Valentine's Day show and things you love. And, so we have segments on people and places to go. And of course, there has to be a segment on Disneyland, because who doesn't want to spend Valentine's Day with 5,000 of their most unknown friends in the happiest place on earth? And I, on the other hand, would like to find myself spending Valentine's Day in some place in this book. So thank you for joining us. And why don't you tell us a little bit about how you even got started?
Well, I blame it on my uncle Emil, who I grew up in San Diego, and they were the closest relatives. And when I was a kid, he subscribed to National Geographic magazine. And instead of playing with my cousins when I went over to his house, I used to spend hours on his living room floor poring over National Geographic and the maps that came with the magazine. And my parents always went on a long summer vacation somewhere, a road trip when I was a kid. And so the two kind of fit together, and I ended up starting writing in high school, and then I majored in geography at UCLA. And then I wanted to be a foreign correspondent, and but very naively thought that someone would hire me if I just wrote to them. And back in those days, there were about 30 American newspapers that had foreign bureaus. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 left today. Wrote away to all of them and didn't get any response, not surprisingly in retrospect, and decided after I graduated from college to quit my then job with a sports magazine, take all my money out of the bank, sell my car, and buy a one-way air ticket to someplace I thought I could be a foreign correspondent. And that was South Africa during apartheid.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of 13 years overseas. And it was also the start of my relationship with National Geographic. Because when I was in South Africa, living in Johannesburg, I wrote away to an editor there, sent him an idea and some photos. And even though they were very amateurish when I look back at them now, because I still have those photos, he was kind enough to write back to me. And that was the beginning of basically a 16-year correspondence in which I kept telling him what I'm doing, where I'm living. And he followed me from Johannesburg to London to Hong Kong and Singapore. And it wasn't until I came back to San Diego in the mid-90s that I got a call out of the blue from an editor at National Geographic, and they wanted me to go somewhere in India that they couldn't find that anyone else had been to. And they said, would you like to write about it for us? And of course, after 16 years of trying, I said yes automatically. And so they sent me to the Andaman Islands and the Bay of Bengal, which most people have never even heard of. But I had been there to do a Story for Islands magazine when I lived in Singapore. And so National Geographic sent me back with a photographer for 2 weeks in one of the most remote corners of the earth. And that was the beginning of somewhere between 40 and 50 book projects for them.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, what's really amazing is that you actually are doing what you set out to do from the very beginning.
Yes, but it took a long time.
Well, time is something that, that's up to us. But you stuck with it. And it sounds like you have also done the other part of what I so respect and love, is people who travel and be in the world and really learn about what's going on all around our planet. So tell us as if there might be one particular favorite place that you especially love?
I get asked that all the time.
I
I don't
bet.
have a, I like a lot of places. And there's a few places that I have no desire ever to go back to again. But most of the time I would, willingly go back to a place. I don't know if I have a favorite place. I feel very much at home in Africa, where I just came back from. And I don't know why. I spent a whole year there, which was kind of my year of living dangerously. And hitchhiking and taking trucks and buses and trains and boats, basically across the whole continent. I was in South Africa for 6 months and couldn't support myself as a freelance writer, even though I had some pretty good assignments. I had one from the Washington Post on the apartheid of sports in South Africa, but it wasn't enough to sustain me financially. And so I took off across the continent and I traveled all the way from South Africa to Egypt, going overland. And I've been back to Africa 15 or 16 times since then for on assignments. And I feel very comfortable there at once, even if it's a couple of years in between. I like the weather, I like the climate, I like the people, I like the terrain. So I guess Africa is my favorite continent. And my wall behind me, which you can't see, is actually filled with antique maps of Africa
Oh, wow.
that I bought over the years. So I guess that's my favorite continent, but I don't have a favorite city or country per se.
So when you write these books and do you come up with the ideas? Does your editor send you out on assignment? How do they happen?
They come up with the book ideas. They do a lot of market research and they try to figure out what people are buying. And they always come up, like the 50 states idea was theirs, and it came out of 100 countries, which I didn't write. And I had 100 countries was done with a team of writers that didn't include me. And then when my editor said, "Would you like to be one of the writers on 50 states?" I said, "No, I'd like to write the whole thing."
Ask for
And
what you
she,
want, baby.
yeah, exactly. And she surprisingly said yes. And that was probably 2015, early 2016. And I spent about a year writing it, which takes about a year to write these stories, the research and writing and travel that goes into these books. And it became kind of an unexpected runaway bestseller. It's, other than their National Geographic Atlas, it's their best-selling book of the 21st century. And it's one of the top, if you don't count atlases, which are still very popular, it's one of the top 3 selling travel books in the United States of the 21st century. And it's never, ever left the Amazon travel bestseller list since it came out in 2017.
Well, I
And
totally understand why. I mean, I'm one of those people who reads cookbooks like a novel. I read travel books like a novel. I
yeah,
travel and I cook, but I still would rather kind of enjoy the book. And there's always beautiful pictures. And but this one, when I picked it up, it was literally I would love to, like, what do I love? Well, I love to travel. So here's this book sitting on my brother's shelf. But I opened up to the first state, Alabama, and
mhm,
right there, like even just that opening paragraph, I'm like, I didn't know all those people came from Alabama. I didn't know this stuff. And I thought, this is,
yeah.
right up front, you got me.
Well, that's what I try to do. I also kind of look for quirky, unknown facts about places when I write about them that are not so well known. And I think that really draws people in. And an example of that is something I did for CNN Travel a couple of years ago. I went to Namibia, and there's a tiny like panhandle of Namibia that stretches halfway across Africa. It's called the Caprivi Strip. And it's a funny piece of geography because the Germans who controlled Namibia at the time also controlled Tanganyika, which became Tanzania. And they wanted an overland link between their 2 colonies. So they went to the British and they said, "We'll trade you Zanzibar Island for this tiny strip of Africa that goes across the middle." And so the British got Zanzibar, and they brought Indian civil servants to basically manage the tiny island colony. And one of those civil servants was Freddie Mercury's father. So Freddie Mercury was born in Zanzibar. if the Germans had never traded Zanzibar to the Brits, then they would have never been in Zanzibar. He wouldn't have been born there. He wouldn't have immigrated to the UK. There never would have been Queen or Freddie Mercury, the rock star. All
See,
because of this weird little,
I love that stuff. I live for that stuff. And you're living that stuff. Do you travel to every place that you're writing about, or is some of it pure research?
once in a while it's pure research because it would be impossible. I mean, if you look at the trails book that's coming out next month, one of the trails is the Trans-Canada Trail, which takes anywhere from 3 to 6 years to hike. I did not hike the Trans-Canada Trail, but I hiked bits and pieces of it in 4 different provinces. But if I was going to take 6 years to hike one trail, I would never get the book done. So I try to experience at least a bit of everything that I write about. It's not always possible, but I like to think that at some point in time I will get to all these places and try all these things. The cities book, I probably out of the 100 cities in the cities book that came out last year, I would say I have been to 90 to 95, but there were a couple that I just can't get to, so I have to research and I have to talk to friends and I have to talk to people who live there. So I try to get to know the city as well as possible. Google Street View has been an unbelievable tool for doing that, because I can actually virtually walk around a place I've never been before and try to get some idea of what the atmosphere, the vibe is like. And I can also do that to places I haven't been to in a long time. I can go back and walk around virtually on Google Street View, which is an amazing tool for someone like me.
That is amazing. It's actually amazing for anybody, but for different reasons, I'm sure. And I'm glad to know you're using it for good. But so the trails book that's coming out, you said it's coming out in February. Is there a launch date?
February 17th is the launch date. Yeah.
Super. So where can our viewers look for that, and where can they find all the books?
Well, you can go to my website because they're listed there with links to where to buy them on Amazon. They're also available on the Barnes & Noble website. They're available in a lot of bookstores, both independent. I always urge people to go to independent bookstores and try to buy them there. There's also the Disney/National Geographic books website. Disney owns National Geographic now. And I actually get paid by Disney now, funny enough.
So you might be spending Valentine's Day at the happiest place on earth. That's all.
I don't think so. I love the happiest place on earth, and I made sure my kids grew up going there just like I did. Yeah. And now I'll wait for the grandchildren to go back, I think. So
that sounds like a perfect idea, perfect plan. And in the meantime, I'm sure you'll find some place to go, as will I, because I have been genuinely inspired, and I'm so grateful that you were able to get back from Africa and come talk to us today. Joe, I hope we can bring you back and talk about some of the other books that are coming up for you and other projects. You're just everywhere. Sure. And I really want our viewers to, start to look for you and follow you on your social media and through your website, which is beautiful, and with additional stories, wonderful stories that you continue to tell. Thank you for bringing the world to us.
Oh yeah, it's my pleasure.
And we'll hope to see you again, and we'll be right back.